Welcome to the Life Outdoors Podcast. Our mission is to educate, entertain, and motivate. We speak life into and through the outdoors. Now join your hosts, Nate Bailey and Gage Bailey, as we navigate through the mountains of this life. And this is your host, Nate Bailey. Gage Bailey's not here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about him behind his back. And it's one of those podcasts that it's kind of a trying to figure out what went on during elk season and some things that we learned during elk season. I think some takeaways that I got by having some young men with me. But before we do that, I would like to encourage you guys, if you could, please go down and leave us a review. Also, if you leave us a 5-star review, we're picking out of people that are leaving us 5-star reviews, and I'm going to send them a hat. I'll probably send the Life Outdoors multicam hat, and I'll send them a hat. Let's see, probably once we hit our 5th episode, I'll pick out of all the people that leave 5-star reviews, and I'll do a random pick over, do one of those random number things on the computer, and then whoever gets there, then we will send them a free hat. So if you would do that, leave us some questions, leave us some comments. We also have, I want to bring to your attention also, we have a YouTube channel with the same name, The Life Outdoors. And we have all sorts of content on there. We upload videos about bow season, about duck hunting, about fishing, about just about anything you could think of. We have a series on there about the truth. We have these podcasts are uploaded to there. So just about everything that you could think about, a couple of ding-dongs out in the outdoors doing, well, that would be on there. We have some great funny videos. We have some more serious videos. We have we don't have a ton of elk hunting on there yet. I've been kind of saving all that video. I'm going to start probably uploading it to that though. And, and we'll make a video for the film festivals later, but I think I'll start uploading some of the stuff that we already have. So with that said, please go check those out, subscribe, leave us reviews, do all that good stuff. Subscribe to this podcast downloads. It all helps get the word out, and we're trying to really get some word out and help people. So that all helps. You could guys, if you want to be part of the life, that could be your part. So thanks a bunch. Next, I'd like to term this podcast. This podcast is Whoopi Goldburg. Yeah, I know. Whoopi Goldberg, UFC, and the attack against young men. And the reason I say that is because we live in a culture that is so against manhood. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, and it's probably because you're listening to this podcast because of elk hunting or duck hunting or something like that, or fly fishing. And a lot of those kind of things tend to have a lot more male types in it. So you guys might think that I'm crazy by saying that. But the fact of the matter is that our culture, if you look at it from the time that guys hit school, from the time they hit kindergarten, guys are told not to be guys anymore. We look at them at kindergarten and preschool before they go, and we go, oh man, look at those little rambunctious, cute little guys. And then we sit them in a room, and we tell them to be quiet and listen. And then we tell them to do this. Now, I guess I was told the other day that some of these kids have to go to kindergarten for 8 hours. I couldn't imagine. I had a hard enough time in high school at 8 hours, but and I was able to go from class to class. Could you imagine being poor little kindergartner males that are like me, that want to get out and play in the woods and run around, and go see things and go do things. Those males, could you imagine what that would take for them to sit there? Riddling, right? That's what they say. Anyhow, one of the things that I was wanting to point out is how cool it is when you run across young men who know how to be men. And of course, none of us completely get this right, other than Jesus Christ himself. None of us completely get this right. But one of the things that I'd like to point out is us the masculine young man is fiercely in this world is fiercely fought against. And why is that? Well, part of the reason is because if a young man is living out his God-given masculinity, then he is dangerous to evil. And so if you could nip that thing in the bud, if you could get them in the young school, and when they're young school kids, then you could start taking away some of that danger against evil. And I'm talking evil in this world. You guys all know it. I'll give you for instance. When I was growing up, it was nothing for us to have a shotgun. And I had a shotgun in my Jeep sitting at the school. And I went to a little school. You guys, I know rural schools are awesome. But I don't think you could even get away with this at a rural school nowadays. But I sat in a rural school, and I'd leave my shotgun in my Jeep in the parking lot. And I wasn't the only one. There were several guys that were doing this. And I would have my Jeep, and at lunchtime, our school was right next to the Sprague River in Chilliwack, Oregon. And if you walked up the Sprague from my school about 500-600 yards, half a mile maybe, if you walked up there, there was a dam it was the old irrigation dam, and it backed up water in there, and there was a lot of tules, and you could go duck hunting up there. And so we'd duck hunt during lunch, and then in the summer we'd fish during lunch in the Sprague. And these are things that we did during lunchtime, and we don't get to do that anymore. I mean, to even have a gun in your car at school, they would probably run you into jail and throw the book at you. But the funny thing is, so things have changed a little bit. So it's really hard to be a young man. Now, is that completely right? Well, if you start thinking about it, if you start thinking about what that represents freedom. None of us did anything wrong with those guns. So to take that piece of freedom away from people, over the idea that something might go wrong, it can be a problem. Rural communities, 16-year-old kids with shotguns in rural communities probably kept a lot of people from committing crime. If you really think about it, there's always that one or two or three people that go to a rural community because they're getting away from something. And I bet you that has kept people away from crime for quite a few generations, is the fact that there's somebody armed in the community and somebody who's willing to, that knows how to protect themselves. So the next thing I'd like to point out was these young men that I was with this last elk season. We were sitting around, and it was a tough hunt. I'll tell you right now, it was probably one of the hardest hunts that I've been on in the last 10 years. We ran into elk early. We found them. We ran up there, and we went to the place where they were, where we've been hunting quite a few years, and we've been into them quite a few times. And we did, we got into a couple bugles up there, but the big thing was we had elk on the cameras, and we never had any elk relaxing on the cameras. And so we were like walking around looking at things, and we were kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And finally we ran into a big old set of, you guessed it, wolf prints. And so there are wolf prints all over in there. So we decided, well, we'll go on the other side of the drainage, and we'll go over there and maybe get out of the wolves. And that's what kept the elk moving and probably kept them from bugling a whole lot. We did hear a couple bugles, but it's not what we were used to. We went over to the other side of the valley, and we ran into people after people after people. There were a lot of elk in there, and I think some people are really getting smarter. OnX has really helped this hunting situation out, and these guys are starting to figure out the stuff that we were just crazy enough to do without GPSs and without that kind of GPS. And so I think people are starting to figure that out. But what we got in there, and what was funny is we found the same thing in there. We found wolf tracks everywhere. So the Gage was with me, and a young man named David Fincher was with me. And David, this was his first year ever really hunting hard. Matter of fact, we were talking about how far we were going one day, because he was tracking everything on onX. He tracked everywhere we went on onX, and And one day we were to 15 miles. We were sitting on this ridge, looking down in this basin that we knew we had to go into, and there was elk sign everywhere. We were just having a hard time finding them, and we were up on top of this mountain, trying to figure out where they might be. And there are several drainages coming off this mountain, like 5 individual creeks that turn into pretty big creeks coming off of it. And then there were springs in these little draws. So one of the things, we were sitting up there talking, and he was like, yeah, we're already at 15 miles today. And he says, you know what the funny thing is? I've never walked longer than 3 miles in my life before this trip. And here we are. This is like on a Wednesday. Here we are every day putting on at least 10 miles. And you know, I didn't hear a peep out of him. Of course, I told him before I said the one stipulation, David, because he's been after me to take him hunting for a long time, and he's been wanting to go. And I'm real particular about who I take hunting. I just, I don't need to hear how bad it is, you know, because every one of us, if you've ever been elk hunting, it can be pretty bad out there. It can be, you have to have a lot of guts to go into the places especially that I'm going to go into. But at the same time, you got to have a lot of guts. If you're going to chase elk, you got to be able to go, oh, they're not here. We're going to have to go in that other drainage. And that means it's going to hurt. And you got to be able to jump in and do it. So that's part of what we were doing. And so anyhow, I gained a ton of respect right there and then when he told me that. I'm thinking to myself, you know, yeah, he's in pretty decent shape and stuff. That's not an issue. But the thing is I don't care how good a shape you're in. If you've never done that before, and then all of a sudden you're in the elk woods with a pack and carrying a bow on your back and filming and things like that, and to not whine or cry, that takes something. That's character right there. That built a ton of respect. And anyhow, I was taken back about young men, and we sat up there. We would sit up there on top of the ridges, and we'd talk about what the things that they're going through, the things that they have to face, and some of the fears that they have. Because I think us as older guys, I'm close to 50 now, and I think we really need to talk to the young guys about fear, because they've been since the time that they were raised, they've been put under a fear thing. They can't, you can't go to school with a pocket knife. You're going to be in trouble if you have a pocket knife. If you get in a fight nowadays, both people are in trouble because that fight is wrong. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that people fight over the wrong things, but not every fight's wrong. Not every fight is wrong. I'll tell you right now, not every fight. You know, when I was a kid, I remember a couple fights, and I remember one guy who was standing up for this female. This one guy was giving this female a ton of problems. I mean, to the point, you know, you could tell when somebody's just kind of coming on strong to a girl, but this was beyond that. This is to where she was so uncomfortable. She was being pushed in a direction she did not want to go. It was almost like mental rape. It was that bad. And finally, when we were standing around there, and finally we were like, hey, knock it off, telling this guy, you need to quit that. That is not cool. That's not how we act. And to the point where this other guy comes in and says, you will stop. And that kind of raised the hackles on this guy, and he came after him, and he says, I'm going to kill you, basically, is what he said. And so they got in a fight. They got in a fist fight. And you know, they both got hauled off to everything got stopped, and they got hauled off to the principal's office, and the guy that started the fight was in trouble, and the other guy went back to class. That's how it used to be. Now, I'm not condoning fighting for anything, you know, just for anything. I'm not doing that. The only time really to fight is if you're protecting somebody else. That's the way I see it. But what I am saying is a true man is put in positions to be the protector and to be able to stop some of those things from happening. And that is what happened there. It was totally what happened there. We all told everybody what was going on, but in today's culture, they still would have been in trouble because it was a fight. That is not what reality was ever meant to be. Men were supposed to be masculine and stop those kind of things. And so when we look at today's culture and we look at the things that people are talking about in today's culture, and this is why I brought up Whoopi Goldberg, is she was attacking Donald Trump Jr. Now I don't want to bring politics into this, and this is not about politics. This is about a statement that Donald Trump Jr. made. He said that with all the stuff that was going on with Kavanaugh, and here nor there, I don't know the ins and outs of that, and I don't care about the ins and outs of it. I don't care about that. But this whole Me Too movement is an issue. One, it's an issue because there's not enough guys out there to stop it. And I'm not talking about stopping it against girls, but I'm talking about stopping it with guys that are propagating that kind of idea. There would be no Me Too movement if real guys existed. They would knock the blocks off of these guys that are doing this stuff. Now that's one of the problems. That's why there is a Me Too movement. But there's also another side of that. There's this side where there's definitely attack on men, where they're trying to bring out the Me Too movement so that they could gain power off of what they do. And so that is a direct attack on how men should be. Men are afraid to stand up nowadays. I mean, I've been in that situation. I remember being in a situation where I saw a guy smack his girlfriend, and it was, everything in me said, just, that's none of your business. Leave it alone. But you can't do that. We guys can't do that. And so, that's something that has been pushed on to me through the culture that I live in. And we as men are in this culture are supposed to be protecting everyone around us. And so I understand some of the Me Too movement, but Whoopi Goldberg was challenging, she was challenging Don Jr. because of a statement that he made about his son. He said, I am worried about the world that my son will have to grow up in, where he's going to have to look over his back with every situation that he is in with a female. And Whoopi Goldberg took that as, and she manipulated it as that Don Jr. knew something of his son, that he would actually carry out those things that he was saying. And that's not what he was saying at all. He was saying that allegations, all somebody has to do is say that that's the way it was, and everybody thinks that. Now, that's a direct attack against men, because now men are going to detach and get away from what it is to be a man. They see that kind of stuff happening. If they could lose their whole family over it, they'll just walk the other way. If they could lose their livelihood, if they could lose they're just going to walk the other way. So that is an attack. Sitting up on that hillside, talking to these young men, that was one of their concerns, is how do you be a man in this society? How do you stand up for what's right in this society? And I said, it's not easy. I said, I understand that. And like I said, remember what I prefaced. If they could get rid of men in society, if people could get rid of men in society, if evil wins, there will be no men around to take care of evil. You see what I'm saying? There would be no Me Too movement. There would be no need for it with a lot of men around. The next thing I want to bring up is also is this idea of what manhood is. And this was something that we talked about up on the knoll, is the difference between UFC manhood, which I love. I like to watch UFC, and I'll be the first one to admit it's good. It's good stuff to. I don't want to say it's good stuff to watch. I like to watch it. That's all I'll say. But that is not the true test of manhood. That if we swing the pendulum the other way, so we have Whoopi Goldberg over on one side saying that men are just male chauvinist pigs, and that we need to stomp on that and all these things. If you take the pendulum to the other side, where men are just these alpha males that are taking on the world and beating each other up and super in shape and all that. Well, we're missing the other side of manhood as well, and I think a lot of that sometimes is to cover up true manhood. Is to because my son and David we were sitting up there and talking about this thing called manhood, and they said, yeah, there's a lot of emphasis placed on that as well, or too much. What manhood really should be. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's some stuff in the UFC that is good for men. There's a lot of good Christian men in the UFC. But at the same time, that is not the definition of what manhood is. We don't live in a Dana White world. Manhood is more than just that. And I want to point that out. So one of the things that I really want to point out is what true manhood is. So I've talked about the spectrums of manhood. And there are some times when the UFC man needs to come out of you. Like I said, there's good Christians in the UFC. But what I really want to point out is what true manhood should look like. And, it comes from Paul talks about true manhood in Timothy, 1 Timothy 6:11, and he says that men should pursue things, and Paul gives 6 things that men should pursue. And I would say that this is pretty sure and probably strikes home with just about everybody, every man once they've heard it. And these are the 6 things: righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, and gentleness. Yeah, those are 6 things that he tells Timothy to pursue, to go after. And that means us too, that we should go after. These are the things that manhood really represents. Now, let's break some of those down. The first thing is pursuing after is righteousness. What is righteousness? I mean, because whenever somebody says this, then everybody thinks of self-righteousness, and that's not what we're after. We're not after being self-righteous. We're after being right, or following righteousness, or passing on righteousness, not being right ourselves. Because very often, most all of our battles are over us being right? Me included. I'm really guilty of this. Ask my kids. Anyhow, and sometimes I am right with them too. I mean, you guys need to listen up sometimes. But I don't always have to be right. But I do have to be righteous. God himself says to be righteous, right? He says, man of God should hunger and thirst for righteousness. Matthew 5:6 says that we should hunger for that. That's something that we should be after. And what's that mean to hunger for righteousness? That means actually to say that God is right and that we have to follow that he is the righteousness that we need to follow. And so when we point to righteousness, a lot of people, the whole movements of things, when we stand up for something that's right, the problem is a lot of times we take it on ourselves. We say, this is what right is. And a lot of people look at you like, well, that's just because you say it's right and that's what you want to believe is right. Because we live in a world where we think that all opinions come out of human beings. Well, opinions do, but not reality. So here's the deal. If God is God, if God is who he says he is, and he is, if he is, then he has the ownership over what's right. So when we actually proclaim something to be right, like it's right that you shouldn't just eat McDonald's hamburgers or Carl's Jr., it's right that you shouldn't just do that. That's because God designed it that way. He doesn't want us just eating all the enriched flour that's in the buns and all the, well, we don't know what kind of meat it is really, but all of the stuff that's in the hamburger patty forever, or to eat just those delicious French fries. They're awesome. But if that's all we ate forever, that would be something that wasn't right. And so when we say that something isn't right, what we're doing is we're just proclaiming what's already been said. So let's get that out of our minds that, we're being self-righteous. Don't stand on your own righteousness. If you say, look, this is wrong because God says so, and then leave it at that. And people will probably not like it, but that's all right. But the fact of the matter is, we as men, that's what we have to do. We have to do it first in our own lives. That's why we need to read God's word, because we would not know what is wrong if we don't read God's word. Honestly, if you're not offended at something that is said to you in the Bible, then you're not really reading enough. It should offend you to the point where you need to change. So, because it states what is right. So when we start looking at righteousness, that's what we're chasing. We're actually chasing God's own character. That's what righteousness is his own character. So the second thing is godliness. So this goes with righteousness, right? It's actually to fear God is what it really means. We're chasing an awe of God. Hebrews 12:28. Serve him with reverence and fear. So to come to Christ, to come to God means, and the word fear here does mean fear, but it means fear of like, oh my goodness, this is the author and the keeper of my faith. He is the author and the keeper of the creation. He is the author and keeper of everything that is true, good, loving, beautiful, all the things that you want to be. That's who owns it all. So I really need to do what he says. That's what living in fear of God is going, whoa, who is this that can walk on the water? Who is this that controls the waves? Who is this that and living in that fear, that, you guys, that is a man thing that we do. That was probably one of the biggest things that we could pass on to the people around us, is going, no, man, you're you just said God's name in vain. Do you understand who that is? Do you understand who that guy is that you just offended? If you understood it, you would never say it. I don't care if you believe it or not. If you understood it, I don't care if you believe in God or not. Even if you don't believe in God and you're still saying his name in vain, you are still offending him. So, godliness is something that we chase after. And then after that is faith. What is faith? Faith is the assurance of things hoped for but not yet seen. So we need to follow faith. And I'm telling you, faith is something that is completely different than what we make it out to be. It's not Hallmark Channel faith. I have nothing against the Hallmark Channel, don't get me wrong, but it's not that ooey gooey stuff, right? Just read the back end of Hebrews 11, like Hebrews, I think it's 11:36. Look what faith has done. It says that it's taken nations, that it's crumbled kingdoms, that faith has, through faith, humans have done all these things. So faith is something that is very manly, and that we also need to propagate in other people. We need to help their faith by the way that we are. If you say that you're a Christian, the people are looking at you as a representation of Christ. And you need to understand, guys especially, you need to understand, guys with kids and wives, you need to understand that you are the stand-in, the image of what God is doing into this world. Now, that even means when you blow it, you have enough faith in God to go, man, I blew that, guys. Thanks for calling me out on it. And I blew that, and I really want to stand before God, and I'm so sorry. That's a faithful thing to do. But what I'm saying is, you are there in people's lives to help build this faith. All right. The second thing, this is the fourth thing, is love. And love is another one of those things that is not the Hallmark Channel love. Now, I tease everybody about the Hallmark Channel because my wife loves it, and she does because the Hallmark Channel understands women. The Hallmark Channel knows exactly how women operate and tick. But and it's good. It is good. The shows that they show on there show a hero coming in and sweeping a girl off of her feet, and she needs help, and a guy helps her out, and and they live happily ever after. That's actually the gospel if you really look at it. But so what about this love thing? You know, my some of the most loving people that have been in my life that show me what true love is, and I'm saying true love, have been guys, and real manly guys, and teaching me how to, we teach each other. I took David his first time elk hunting this year and showed him how you could read sign, why we jump ridges, why we make these moves, how we call, and all those things. That's love. That's acting out of love. That's trying to build somebody up. Love is actually very sacrificial. Guys, your main job on this earth is to sacrifice. I know that doesn't sound like what we're being taught, right? That's why I'm saying part of this community is teaching us how not to be guys. So one of the things is love is a very guy thing, and love, if you want to boil it down, sacrifice is the proof of all love. So we sacrifice for our family, we sacrifice for our communities, we sacrifice for our country, we sacrifice for the righteousness of others. All these things we sacrifice for, and that's all love. And the last thing I'd like to point out was steadfastness. So steadfastness means to be steady in it. When I was in the Coast Guard, we were always told to be steadfast in what we're doing. I mean, they had us freezing out in the middle of the ocean and water there, and they wouldn't even want us to shake. They'd tell us, don't even shake. You're not being steadfast. You need to stand at attention. But and they knew we were all going to shake. You can't stop shaking. But what they were teaching us is that we, even though all the distractions of the cold, the hurt, our legs, the freezing, all that stuff, they were saying, put all that aside and think about what's the most important thing. And at that point, it was, standing in attention. But what they were trying to get us to do was to be steadfast when we had to get out in the real world. And that served me well because I went up to Alaska and we spent so many hours freezing. If I would have thought about all the freezing that I was doing rather than my job at hand, I wouldn't been a good coastie, and I wouldn't been able to do the stuff that coasties have to do. And so they knew something of men, and they knew that men had to live within this realm. And so they taught us how to be steadfast in this. And that's being steadfast in all the things that I've mentioned above, being steadfast in all those things in faith, being steadfast in love, being steadfast in all those things. And the last thing I'd like to point out is gentleness. Gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is actually the restraint of monstrous strength. So there's a time to be gentle. Of course, there's a time to take your whip and whip the tax collectors, or not the tax collectors, the people selling the offering in the temple. But gentleness is restraining massive power for a good reason. And you guys, as humans, as men, that's what we do. As human men, we are supposed to be gentle. Gentle first. Gentle giants. We should display it over everybody that we oversee. They should want to be around us. We should be actively involved in who they are. Jesus was this. I mean, Jesus has the ultimate strength out of anybody in the world, yet he was the most gentle person in the world as well. So, he could have called down angels, legions of angels, to take out anybody he wanted to at any time. And yet he was so gentle that he even talked to the women at the well. He was even gentle with the Pharisees. He talked some hard words that they had to listen to, but he was gentle. All right, so those are the things that the Bible steers us to. Those are the things that I saw in these two young men that were in front of me when we're sitting up on an elk ridge. They practice this stuff. I watched Gage when he's with his wife practicing gentleness with her. I watched David as he's being steadfast in how he's going to treat his wife without embarrassing him. he actually puts money away for her, even though he doesn't have a girlfriend yet. His future wife, he wants to take care of her. He's making sure that he's got money set aside so he could buy a house and do all the things that he thinks is good, protects her, takes care of her, sacrifices for her, and he's already doing that before he's even met her, and he prays for her even before he's met her. Dude, when you got 20-year-old males out there in this world like that, it makes me feel good. I rejoice in the fact that there are males in this world like these guys. But there's a true attack in this culture against that. They don't want to see that. So I hope that's helped a little bit. I hope you guys, men, if you're out there and you hear this and you're like, man, yeah, that's me. I'm supposed to be stepping up in this. Well, you know what? That's the Holy Spirit telling you to step up into it. Move into that position. Lean into him. Understand that he's the one speaking to you. And then all you got to do is practice some of that faith. Just move into what he's saying. Or try to. And I guarantee you, the more that you do, the more you'll see of him, and the easier more faith you'll have. So, all right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for listening. Please go over, like I said, check out our, we even have a Facebook group, The Life Outdoors. You can even join it. But we also have the Life Outdoors YouTube channel, and we have, of course, more Life Outdoors podcasts. Thanks for listening. Hopefully that helped. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Life Outdoors podcast. Join the Life Nation by spreading this podcast, or by going over to our YouTube channel, giving us a subscribe, or even by following us on Instagram. All these things help spread the life. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening. Keep living.